In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King listens to the upper and lower houses of Parliament's reply to the speech from the throne delivered earlier this month at the opening of the 17th Parliament. In the Libyan capital's clashes, the death toll rises to 43 and 460 injured, while the country's deputy intelligence chief is kidnapped outside Tripoli airport. And to mark the 50th anniversary of JFK's assassination, U.S. President Barack Obama and former President Bill Clinton join a wreath-laying ceremony at his grave on Wednesday. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty King Abdullah listened to the lower house and upper houses of Parliament replies to the speech from the throne, which he delivered at the opening of the first ordinary session of the 17th Parliament on the 3rd of this month. Senate President Abdulrauf Rawabde said the speech brought Parliament's responsibilities to the forefront and urged members to work harder to build on achievements, especially in relation to political reforms. He said the speech singled out one major problem facing the country, and that is the need for government to improve its performance and aspire for the highest levels of professionalism and efficiency. Rawabde praised the King's wise leadership in handling the influences of the Arab Spring and the impact of a global financial crisis on Jordan. Speaker of the lower house, Atif Tarawne, said His Majesty's speech inspires government's institutions to continue efforts towards further reforms, development and democracy. To assert justice for all, he said the House has formed a new committee, the Integrity and Transparency Committee, which will take up the task of overseeing financial and administrative corruption in state institutions. Tarawne also said the House will revisit the elections and political parties' laws in response to the King's vision and the people's aspirations. Minister of Foreign and Expatriate Affairs Nasser Joude participated in the preparatory foreign ministerial meeting for the 3rd Arab-Africa Summit in Kuwait. The meeting adopted the draft Kuwait Declaration that seeks to forge stronger economic and investment cooperation between Arab and African states and bring them closer on issues of common interest. On the sidelines of the meeting, Joude held talks with his Egyptian and Algerian counterparts that focused on ways of boosting bilateral ties, as well as efforts to advance Palestinian-Israeli peace negotiations. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will travel to Israel on Friday to discuss a proposed deal between world powers and Iran on the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned a proposal endorsed by Washington to reduce sanctions on Iran if Tehran suspends parts of its nuclear work. He said he would discuss the issue with French President François Hollande, who arrived in Israel today, with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Wednesday. Speaking at the start of his 3-day state visit to Israel, Hollande said France opposes lifting any sanctions on Iran until it provided further guarantees that it is not pursuing atomic weapons. Syrian bank accounts frozen abroad are gradually being freed up for use to fund food purchases, much needed in some areas of the country. Head of Syria's General Foreign Trade Organization said France is the most committed to releasing the money. France in September declared the use of frozen Syrian bank assets to fund the export of food to the country as part of an EU system that allows the use of these funds for humanitarian ends. And recently, the Paris-based Union of Arab French Banks has approved the release of funds for purchases. Syria's GFTO has been trying in vain for several months to buy sugar and rice in international tenders using funds frozen abroad. Traders said the reason was a failure to secure permission from governments to free the funds. Over to the violence in Libya, and the death toll and the number of those injured in clashes in the capital Tripoli on Friday has risen to more than 43 dead and 460 injured. Footage broadcast on the Libyan channel Al-Wataniya showed crowds gathered outside a Tripoli hospital as the wounded were wheeled into the building. The Ministry of Health has asked civilians to donate blood in light of the rising numbers. Meanwhile, Libya's deputy intelligence chief was kidnapped outside Tripoli airport. Mustafa Noah, the head of the agency's espionage unit, was pulled into a vehicle in a car park and had no bodyguards with him at the time. No group claimed responsibility for the abduction. A Boeing 737 crashed on landing in the Russian city of Kazan, killing all 44 passengers and 6 crew members on board. The flight from Moscow attempted to make a second landing, but began to lose altitude quickly before its fuel tank exploded upon hitting the runway. The airport was closed as firefighters extinguished the fire. It was on November 22, 1963, when John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, was killed at the age of 46 during a trip to Texas. To mark the 50th anniversary of his assassination, U.S. President Barack Obama will join former President Bill Clinton and his wife on Wednesday in a wreath-laying ceremony at JFK's grave. Obama will also present the Presidential Medal of Freedom, established by Kennedy and considered the nation's highest civilian honor, to recipients at the White House. This report sheds light on the iconic presidency of JFK and his tragic death.
The slogan, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
With those words, John F. Kennedy launched his storied and ultimately tragic presidency. It was 50 years ago this week, on that fateful November day in Dallas, Texas, that President Kennedy was shot dead. But in life, the youthful Kennedy, along with his wife Jacqueline, forever changed the office of the American presidency. Kennedy called on Americans to rise to the challenge of a new era.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
In the autumn of 1962, Kennedy guided the country through the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest the nation ever came to flirting with nuclear war.
Unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
Abroad, he emphasized the power and persuasion of the U.S. during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, as when he told a crowd in West Berlin that he too is a Berliner.
Today, in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is, Ich bin ein Berliner.
The President and Mrs. Kennedy, a warm welcome.
But it was his shocking death that forever ingrained Kennedy into the American psyche. On November 22, 1963, 46-year-old Kennedy and the First Lady arrived in Dallas for a 5-city re-election fundraising tour.
Even the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting their chance to see the President. It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route.
At around 12:30, shots rang out from the Texas School Depository, and Kennedy, along with Texas Governor Connolly, were struck.
The President of the United States is dead. I have just talked to Father Oscar Hubert of the Holy Trinity Catholic Church. He and another priest tell me that the pair of men have just administered the last rites of the Catholic Church to President Kennedy. President Kennedy has been assassinated. It's official now. The President is dead.
That weekend, the nation mourned and watched as his alleged assassin, former Marine Lee Harvey Oswald, was shot by a nightclub owner on live television. Today, the eternal flame at Arlington National Cemetery marks the grave of the late president, whose full promise was tragically left unfulfilled.
For the 16th time this year, Sicily's Mount Etna, Europe's tallest and most active volcano, sent streams of red-hot lava and ash plumes into the sky as it erupted early today. The main phase of the eruption lasted about 5 hours and consisted of violent pulsating lava reaching between 300 and 600 meters in height. There were also thundering explosions of giant magma bubbles that ejected large glowing liquid spatters hundreds of meters in radial directions. There were no reports of damage or evacuation in the area, and while the eruption themselves do not put the local population at risk, the local inhabitants do have to live with the ash showers that flow. More than 2 years after the Fukushima nuclear plant accident, most Japanese still worry about the impact of radiation. A nationwide survey in Japan showed that nearly 90% of Japanese still have concerns about the impact of the accident. According to the survey, the public's top concern is the radiation's impact on human health, especially the health of youngsters, and people are particularly afraid of radioactive substances contained in food. Most surveyed also said they are not satisfied with the measures the government has taken so far, and they urge officials to solve the radiation problems as soon as possible. The biennial Dubai Air Show 2013 started today for the first time at Dubai's new airport, Al Maktoum International. About 1,000 exhibitors from the global civil aviation and military aviation industries and 60,000 trade visitors will take part in this year's air show, making it the biggest Dubai air show ever. The event is held for the first time at the exhibition venue of Al Maktoum International Airport, also known as Dubai World Central, currently capable of accommodating 7 million passengers per year. Upon completion after 2020, it will be the biggest in the world, capable of hosting 160 million passengers annually. At the last air show in 2011, the total order book of all plane and aviation-related purchases exceeded $63 billion. The air show continues until Thursday. Nigeria became the first African country to qualify for next year's World Cup finals after a 2-0 win over Ethiopia. A penalty from Victor Moses and free kick from Victor Obina ensured Nigeria a place in Brazil after beating Ethiopia 4-1 on aggregate in their playoff tie. The win in the second leg means the reigning African champions have reached the finals for the 5th time, having played in 4 of the last 5 tournaments. Another 3 African playoff ties will be decided over the next 4 days. World number 2 Novak Djokovic forced the Davis Cup finals against holders Czech Republic into a decisive 5th with a 6-4, 7-6, 6-2 win over Thomas Berdych in the opening reverse singles. Djokovic came out on top after an amazing opening 2 sets, gaining the upper hand and clinching a tiebreak after winning the last 3 points. Both players produced tennis of the highest quality, refiling in aces, passing shots and volleys, and most of all, thrilling fans in a packed arena. And American motorcycle racer Kurt Caselli died from injuries he suffered in an off-road race in Mexico's Baja California. The 30-year-old was competing in the Score Baja 1000 on Friday when he apparently lost control on a sandy, high-speed section of the route. He suffered serious trauma in the accident. And finally, relatively cold weather tonight with a continued chance for thundered showers accompanied by hail. Similar conditions continue tomorrow as the kingdom remains under the effect of unstable weather. Winds will be northeasterly moderate to brisk, blowing dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect partly cloudy skies with a chance for scattered rain, while winds will be northerly moderate to brisk and seas slightly choppy. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King listens to the upper and lower houses of Parliament's reply to the speech from the throne delivered earlier this month at the opening of the 17th Parliament. In the Libyan capital's clashes, the death toll rises to 43 and 460 injured, while the country's deputy intelligence chief is kidnapped outside Tripoli airport. And to mark the 50th anniversary of JFK's assassination, U.S. President Barack Obama and former President Bill Clinton join a wreath-laying ceremony at his grave on Wednesday. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.